Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, Bangladesh and the face-off in Dhaka over what can and cannot be said in the papers, on the airwaves, and online. We begin this week with yet another country where journalists are paying the price for blasphemy. The country is Bangladesh, and like Pakistan and Egypt before it, this is a conflict that pits Islamic fundamentalists against secular voices in the media. Bangladesh has no specific anti-blasphemy law on the books, but political movements like the Hifazat-e-Islami, or the Protectors of Islam, want one. And they are targeting a group of online activists they call the atheist bloggers of Shahbag Square. 2 months back, we reported on the protests in that square, which is in the capital, Dhaka. The demonstrations were sparked by war crimes trials over Bangladesh's War of Independence in 1971. At the height of the unrest in March, one blogger was killed, another 4 were arrested. Mainstream media organizations have not escaped unscathed. News outlets aligned with groups like the Hifazat-e-Islami have been shut down by the government of Sheikh Hasina. For the Bangladeshi authorities, this is a difficult balancing act. How to preserve freedom of speech when one side stands accused of blasphemy and the other of inciting murder. Our starting point this week is the secular fundamentalist divide in Bangladesh.
হেফাজতে ইসলাম বাংলাদেশের মহাসচিব মাওলানা জুনায়েদ বাবুনগরীকে গ্রেফতার করেছে পুলিশ।
There's an important battle taking place in Bangladesh about freedom of speech.
We have seen, unfortunately, that the level of intolerance has increased with the polarization.
We also have a situation where opposition media is being closed down.
So the media or any writer, they have to take care when they're talking about religion on the one hand and about the war crimes trials on the other hand.
The wider issue is, of course, is Bangladesh going to remain as a secular country?
Once again, the streets of Dhaka have been overrun by demonstrators. First, it was one faction, mostly secular, demanding death sentences for those found guilty of war crimes. On May 6th, another faction, religious fundamentalists supporting the Hifazat-e-Islami party, who opposed the existence of the War Crimes Tribunal, came out calling for an anti-blasphemy law to target the writings of a growing band of secular bloggers. The number is in dispute, but the government says 15 people died in the fighting. And before the night was out, 2 television channels covering the story, Diganta TV and Islamic TV, were taken off the air.
That rally actually descended into chaos when activists of Hifazat-e-Islam engaged in 3-way clashes with the police and with ruling party activists. And Diganta and Islamic TV broadcast live some parts of the rally, and it also ran quite extended coverage of these clashes. And we know that at night, at about 2 a.m. in the dead of night, there was a police operation to clear this central banking district of these Islamist activists. And at that time, media was ordered out of the area for a period of about 45 minutes to an hour. Diganta TV did broadcast images from there, and it said that there were casualties, that at least 24 people had died.
The government felt that Diganta was actually inciting people, and they were inciting the people to stay and continue the sitting. And they thought that this is going beyond their remit as a broadcaster, and they said that their guidelines specifically prohibit them from broadcasting anything that incite crowd violence or incite activities which are not seen to be in favor of public order, stability.
They were shut down because the channels were exaggerating vastly the numbers killed in the demonstrations that took place. It seems from numerous reports that some people certainly were killed, but the numbers are enormously controversial at the moment, and that kind of exaggeration were basically lighting a torch in the country.
Both of the channels affected are tied to Islamic political parties or movements. A month ago, the Awami League government moved against a newspaper with a similar ideology, Amar Dash, arresting its editor for inciting religious hatred, among other charges. He is still behind bars, and the paper is out of print, but remains available online. This is a power struggle between voices in the media. pitting mainstream outlets like Amar Daesh and the two Islamic channels against new media upstarts, the secular bloggers credited with or blamed, depending on one's perspective, for starting the Shahbag protest movement.
What happened was in February earlier this year, they set up a Facebook event and asked people to come to the place called Shahbag in Dhaka and demonstrate against a court verdict which gave life imprisonment to a leader of the Jamaat-e-Islami for war crimes. Now, their position was that that man should be hanged, and that brought this group of bloggers to prominence.
These protests were extremely popular, and thousands, tens of thousands of people in the streets for many, many weeks. And the opposition party, the BNP, which is allied to the Jamaat-e-Islami, found it very difficult to deal with that. And one of the ways in which they managed to discredit Shahbag was by depicting them as atheist bloggers. And the media was used as a way to distribute that kind of information.
They presented a list of 84 bloggers that they labeled atheists, and many of those people so labeled would say, we're not atheists, you know, we're questioning people, we're free thinkers, we're not atheists. They were named on an Islamist blog Rajib was named shortly before he was killed.
Rajib Haider was a blogger hacked to death earlier this year. An architect by training and a self-proclaimed atheist, he was considered one of the central organizers behind the Shahbag protests. His laptop was found alongside his lifeless body.
It's unclear exactly who killed him, although a number of people from a group called Hizb ut-Tahrir have been arrested in relationship to that. Subsequent to that, there have been the arrests of 4 bloggers, including perhaps the most well-known, Asif Muhyiddin. In fact, he had previously, before Rajib's death, he had previously been knifed in the streets of Dhaka in relationship to his writings, and is now in detention along with the other 3.
These bloggers in many cases are left-leaning secular youth who believe in the power of the internet, and they organize through social media platforms. They say that they are fighting for a society that is based on a Bengali identity, based on language and culture, rather than a Bangladeshi Muslim identity, which is more religious and based more on a Muslim cultural and a lifestyle way of thinking. They see the effect of religion on society and on the state as a negative thing, and they have advocated strongly in their work the need for a very secular society and the separation of politics and religion.
This struggle for the soul of Bangladesh comes down to conflicting views of national identity, differing definitions of journalism and blasphemy. For those bearing witness, those reporting the story, it is a fight for survival, a fight to have their voices heard. Our Global Village Voices now on freedom of speech and at its limits in Bangladesh.
The Shahbag movement in Bangladesh was initiated and mobilized by a group of young, independent thinkers. They use the internet to mobilize people for peaceful demonstration, and they do this in a very successful manner. The government is worried about the security situation, and now they started closing down media centers and websites linked to radical Muslims. But limiting the freedom of speech is never a solution.
Some of the bloggers who have drawn ire were involved in religious defamation in their work. These bloggers wrote incredibly defamatory remarks about the central belief system of 90% of their fellow citizens. It was a hugely irresponsible thing to do. I do believe in the freedom of speech, so do not share some of the demands against these bloggers. But I believe freedom of speech is closely tied with responsibility, and all people of all faiths are due not only rights of religious freedom, but also respect.
We're always looking for new faces for the program. If you'd like to share your thoughts on the news media as one of our Global Village Voices, just get in touch with us on Facebook or send us a tweet. Our Twitter handle is @AJListeningPost. And don't forget our free video podcast on iTunes. Just look for the Listening Post, Al Jazeera English, and you'll find us there.